right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of Discovering New to the Dragons. Join me as we learn about what may be your new favorite RPG. First things first, somebody that I can't remember because I'm really bad with the names, but somebody recently commented on the first episode of Discovering New Dragons, and asked why there were no timestamps. Something that I've learned in general, excuse me, long form content does better with timestamps, and my long form content. My long form content, because of how rambly and everything like that, really does better with timestamps and things like that. However, with how I've been doing Discovering New Dragons, I just really haven't been able to put timestamps in because it was just too freeform and things like that. And I couldn't figure out a place to put them. So, I've actually written up a slight kind of outline that I'm going to try following from now on for Discovering New Dragons, so that there can be some timestamps in there. And my other goal with this is the whole point of designing or Discovering New Dragons is to give you kind of a brief introduction into a different RPG without it turning into an in-depth review. So I'm hoping that this outline will help me to kind of fine-tune what I talk about, so it gives you guys a better idea of these different RPGs. That being said, which new dragon are we discovering today? Well, this is the RPG that I have the most experience with other than Dungeons and Dragons, and that RPG is Open Legend. It is amazing. I have been running an Open Legend campaign for almost 6 years now. It has been an absolute blast the entire time. So let's dive into the world of Open Legend. Starting first with the history. Giving people an idea of just where these RPGs come from, I feel is important for people to get the full feeling of the RPG. And Open Legend has one of the more interesting histories. Open Legend started in what seems to be October of 2016 as a Kickstarter. It was pitched as this genre-neutral RPG that Matt Mercer and Ed Greenwood, along with a few other industry veterans, to my understanding, had consulted on to create this really interesting RPG. The Kickstarter itself was a really good success. Trying to see. I believed it raised well over what it was looking for. Okay, so yeah, I can't remember what the initial goal was, but it raised over $110,000 to get it up. And if you actually, the Kickstarter page is still there. More about that in a second. But if you actually look at the Kickstarter page, you actually see a picture of Matt Mercer and Ed Greenwood. For those of you who don't know, Matt Mercer, the GM of Critical Role. Ed Greenwood is the creator of the Forgotten Realms campaign setting and a huge name in the world of Dungeons and Dragons. So it was incredibly successful. They unlocked a bunch of stretch goals, and that's where things started going poorly. The original kind of owner of Seventh Sphere Publishing, which was the company that basically owns Open Legend, was a gentleman named Brian Feister. And after the Kickstarter, as happens sometimes with Kickstarters, things just weren't really coming out as quickly as they could. There was a lot of physical rewards that just didn't seem to be coming out. The Kickstarter itself was for the RPG system and a campaign setting called Amira's Dawn. And things just kept getting slower and slower, and things just weren't coming out for years. And eventually, in in June of 2020, after having really, really bad updates and things like that, Brian eventually goes, "Hey guys, I'm sorry about everything that's happened. Here's a huge long explanation of all the bad things that kind of that happened on our end. I'm really sorry about this. I'm transferring this over to someone else to run this. I believe everyone else knew him as the Mustache Man or something similar to that. Or what was it? I literally just saw the words. How is this? I literally just saw the words. Great mustache. There we go. For the love of all. Okay, so Jonathan Potter takes over and things start getting back up. However, as late as 2022, people were still waiting for the last bits of their physical rewards to actually get up to them. Apparently, it was a GM screen. And there still may be a few digital rewards that have not been put into place. So there is a little bit of controversy about Open Legend, and a lot of it was basically just the idea of bad Kickstarter management, which happens all the time. A lot of people think running a Kickstarter is just, hey, look at all the money that we get, and it's not. And if you don't have things set up to get everything worked out and all your shipping figured out, it can take literally years. And a lot of Kickstarters that fail don't fail because they were intending to do anything wrong with the money. They just completely underestimated how difficult it is to run a business, which as soon as you get that huge influx of money, congratulations, you are no longer an independent author, you are a business. Even if you're the only person involved, you've just started a business and you need to learn how to run one really quick. So, that being said, as I mentioned before, I have been running an Open Legend game for 6 years. Or 5.5, almost 6 years. And the system has been, for the most part, complete since that point. So the system itself came out really quickly, and I didn't actually back it. And that's the other thing that's kind of cool about Open Legend is it's 100% open. It is free. You can go to openlegend.com. And look at the entirety of the rules right there. I go there regularly when I run my games to look up rules and things like that. It's really, really good, great. So yeah, that's kind of the history of this system. And like I said, people have been getting less mad at Seventh Sphere Publishing since Jonathan took over years ago. And it's slowly getting to the point where things like that are done. I don't see more stuff coming out for it anytime soon because they still haven't finished that. But it is a feature complete system, and like I said, I've been running a game in it for almost 6 years. So the next section, lore. The lore of a game can be a huge deal breaker. It's going to set up a lot of times it's going to set up how the mechanics work and how everything else is supposed to run. The unique thing about Open Legend itself is genreless, and because of that, it is mostly lore-less. They don't have a quote-unquote default setting. They have an example setting in Amira's Dawn. I own the book for Amira's Dawn, or I own the PDF for it. I never bought the physical because at that point I'd moved away from owning physical. And that setting itself, if I remember correctly, has a kind of fantasy feel, but it does throw some sci-fi and more steampunk stuff in there every so often, but it's generally considered a more generic fantasy setting. But as far as the lore for Open Legend itself, it really doesn't give any. And one of the kind of unique things about that, because a lot of times the lore is going to dictate things like what kind of classes you can play, what kind of equipment is going to show up, even in genre-neutral things like the cipher system that we've already covered. They would give examples of lore and things like that to give you ideas of what to do with it. There really isn't any lore in here at all. And that's kind of one of the things you have to accept with Open Legend is Open Legend is a really great system, but it is a system that you are going to have to create a world for. And when I say you're going to have to create a world for it, you're going to have to create a world. There are, as far as I can see in here, before I say, there are no example monsters, or the few that they might have in there are exactly that, examples. There is no monster manual. There really aren't that many kind of magic items, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. If you're thinking that picking up the Open Legends core rulebook is going to give you something that's similar to a player's handbook, or something like the core rulebook for Pathfinder or Cypher, where it's got everything you need to be able to run, you're going to be a little bit upset because, again, there's nothing really here aside from the rules themselves. But the rules themselves are kind of malleable enough and adaptable enough that I've never had a problem running the game literally on the fly. I stream the Open Legend game I run. It's for Zelda Universe. And we stream it every other weekend, and I have literally had people in the audience suggest monsters that I've had to put into the game right there, and I've built monsters on screen live. And it generally takes no more than a few minutes for a simple monster, and more complex ones might take the better part of 10 to 15 minutes to fully flesh them out. It's a very, very quick, easy system. Since we're talking about that, let's transition to dice rolls and mechanics. For RPGs in general, dice are going to be a thing. I don't think, there are a few RPGs exist that don't use dice. I've seen a couple that use cards, some that just use entirely role-playing, like Fiasco and things like that. But for the most part, you're going to be rolling dice. And it's important for you to know how the dice are going to work in a new RPG. For this one, it has one of my favorite mechanics ever. First things first, all dice rolls are going to be a d20 plus some other dice. Open Legend itself is what I call a skill-based system. What that means, I'm going to actually pull up a character sheet here real quick, just so that I have everything in front of me. Incarnate, Open Legend, there we go. All right, so Open Legend is what I call a skill-based system. Skill-based systems or skill-based RPGs are different from class-based in the idea that in a class-based RPG, you pick a class, and that is where you're going to get most of your abilities. So a warrior is going to be, using weapons and killing things. A wizard is going to be casting spells. A rogue or a thief is going to be kind of sneaky. Open Legend uses a skill-based system. So you have a bunch of different, what they call attributes. And I'm going to read the whole list here because it gets important. You have agility, fortitude, might in the physical attributes. In the mental, you have learning, logic, perception, and will. In the social, you have deception, persuasion, and presence. And then in the extraordinary, you have alteration, creation, energy, entropy, influence, movement, prescience, and protection. What this means is as you add points to any one of these things, it actually changes what kind of dice you roll. If you have 1 point in something, you will add a d4 to a roll. So if I have a 1 in agility, I'll roll a d20 and add a d4 to the roll. However, with 2, it goes to a d6, 3 is a d8, 4 is a d10, 5 is 2d6, 6 is 2d8, on and on, all the way up to 10 being 4d8. They have a point system, effectively very similar to Point Buy, where each higher level costs a little bit more. That being said, by just choosing the different attributes that you put things in, that's how you're going to create your character. the way that you do most of your rolls is you go, well, I want to do this. Like, I want to run over and use my dagger to attack him. Okay, well, the dagger itself is kind of a light weapon. You're using it very kind of acrobatically. Let's call that an agility roll. Go ahead and make me an agility roll. Okay, I roll that and I roll that and I get a 15. Okay, does that beat the armor class? And that's how it goes. If on the other hand, you go, well, I want to throw a fireball at them and have it explode. Okay, well, that's going to be an energy roll. And because it's an area attack, we're going to give you some disadvantage on that. It's another system that's built into Open Legend is the advantage-disadvantage system. Basically, it works very similar to how it works in D&D, but it doesn't affect your D20 roll. It only affects your attribute dice. So if I have a 3 in my agility, I normally roll 1d8. But if I roll a d20 plus 1d8. But if I have advantage 2 on that, well, then I'm going to roll 1d20 and I'm going to roll 3d8. 1 for my normal roll and then 2 additional d8. And then I get to pick whichever one is the highest and use that roll. Disadvantage works the same way. If I have disadvantage 2, then I roll 3d8 and I choose the lowest one. But it gets even more interesting than that. All dice in Open Legend explode. What does that mean? It means anytime you roll the maximum on the die, it means that you keep that number and then you roll again and add to it. And if you roll the maximum number again, you keep that and roll again. So if I roll a d20 and it comes up as natural 20, I get to keep that 20 and I get to roll the d20 again. In the same way, if I roll a d4 and it comes up on a 4, I get to keep that 4 and roll it again. So dice exploding means you can have really, really high rolls. In my Zelda game that I run, I think our highest roll has been in the 60s. It is a very, very fun, dynamic thing. And it means that crazy things can happen often. The other big mechanic in this is what's called every roll matters. And I have used this in almost every other game that I have run. The idea is whenever anybody makes a roll, it's going to move the story forward. Whether or not you succeed, you're never going to have a situation where somebody goes, well, I want to try and pick the lock. And then somebody else goes, well, I want to pick the lock too. And I want to pick the lock too. Or somebody fails and it's like, well, then I'm going to do that. Well, then that one of those rolls was just pointless because if someone else is just going to do it, then why make anyone roll? So anytime you roll, you're going to have one of 3 outcomes. You're going to have a success. You do whatever it is you intended to do. You're going to have a success but at a cost. Maybe you didn't hit the DC, but you're still going to move forward, but there's going to be some kind of punishment, some type of thing that goes wrong. So you succeed, but something happens that you didn't want. You know, you're picking the lock on a chest, and succeeding at a cost might mean, well, you picked the lock, but you picked the lock, but you also set off the trap in there. So yes, the chest is open, but you now have to deal with poison gas. The final result that you can get is you fail, but the story moves forward. You're picking the lock. Unfortunately, you aren't able to pick it, and oh, darn it. Your lockpick broke in the lock. You can no longer pick that lock. You need to find a different way to get past this particular obstacle. And it makes the game really, really fun and entertaining because it means when somebody decides to do something, it's going to matter every single time. It makes players really weigh their choices because they know if they fail, something is going to happen, and maybe it's not something that they don't want. So yeah, it does add a little bit on the DM to kind of always be thinking of, okay, well, how is this going to move the story forward? But as your players get better, they can make suggestions as well. In combat, the way misses work, instead of just, if a player doesn't hit the right number for their attack, they can do one of three, or one of four things effectively. One, they can just decide to miss and have it fail, and that's that's the end of that action. Story still moves forward, or they can choose one of the three things. However, if they choose one of these three things, the enemy they're attacking chooses one of those three things as well. So the first thing is to invoke a Bane of power level 3 or lower. We'll talk about those in just a second, but it's basically a debuff. Second one is just do 3 damage to them. And the third one is you are allowed to move without provoking an opportunity attack, I think up to 15 feet. So you miss your attack. You go, oh shoot, well what am I going to do? Well, we can say that it was a glancing blow and you did just a little bit of damage, or you can invoke effectively a bleed bane, a persistent damage bane, so they start bleeding a little bit. Yeah, you just barely nick them, but it's enough that they're bleeding out now, so they'll take a little bit of damage every turn. Or you can just go, you miss, you go shoot, and you kind of backflip out of the way. However, at the same time you're doing that, maybe you choose to backflip out of the way, but the big burly dude that you just attacked is able to just smack you, and you take 3 points of damage as you go out of the way. Again, that's not an opportunity attack. They don't get to make an attack roll. They just do 3 points of damage. So interesting, really dynamic combat and things like that. And like I said, every roll matters, and dice explode. Now, I mentioned Banes, and they're combined with what are called boons. Banes are negative effects, kind of debuffs and things like that. Boons are positive effects. They are directly related to your attributes. A lot of Banes or boons require a certain attribute to be at a certain power level before you're allowed to invoke them. And by whenever you invoke a Bane or a boon, you roll, and let's say you can invoke the boon at like 3 different levels, at level 1, level 2, and level 3. And when you roll, your roll is only high enough to invoke at level 2. Well, then you still succeed, but you only invoke it at the second level of power, not the third. The same is true about boons. Because of how this system works, it means that you can build these really interesting characters by putting points into certain attributes to kind of make the character that you want. You want to create like an elementalist wizard? Well, put a lot of points into energy. And then also you might want to put a decent amount of points into something like presence or persuasion to kind of mimic that idea of someone that's just kind of an innate caster, sorcerer, elementalist style character. Or let's say you want to create like a sneaky rogue style character that hides in shadows. We'll give them a good agility score, maybe a decent perception score, and then if you want them maybe to be able to move really fast, you could put something in movement, which is extraordinary movement. Might allow them to cast a haste type ability on themselves, or maybe they can actually teleport, things like that. So it is a very, very open system and really, really fun. The way damage and things that work in combat is basically you roll against one of 3 defensive: guard, toughness, resolve. You should be able to figure out how those will work, and however much over the defense you are, that's how much damage you do. So if I rolled a 20 and the guard was a 13 that I was rolling against, well, then you just do 7 points of damage. You have a minimum amount of damage, so if you meet it or get up to 3 above it, you will always do at least 3 points of damage. And critical hits, quote unquote, are not really a thing. It's, exploding dice. If you roll a 42 and their defense is 13, then you're going to do a crap ton of damage. You're going to do 39 points of damage in a single attack. And hit points generally are not massive. Most characters are going to have somewhere between about 15 to maybe 40 or 45 hit points. things like that. So 39 points of damage in a single attack is a huge thing. Also, if you roll 10 over any defense when you are making an attack, you can inflict a bane that you could inflict normally using that attribute for free. So it gets very interesting and fun when you're doing that. I've mentioned some characters, so let's talk about character creation. When you build a character, you have 43 points that you can put really anywhere you want. With the physical, mental, and social attributes, you don't actually need any points in them to make a roll. So let's say you're trying to lie to someone, you have 0 in your deception. Well, then you just roll a d20. However, any of the extraordinary ones, these are things like magic or things that normal people wouldn't be able to do. Those, if you don't have a score in it, you can't roll them. So alteration, literally being able to change things from one thing into another. You can't even attempt to do that if you have no skill in alteration. Same is true about energy, entropy. Movement, again, is supernatural movement. Being able to move significantly quicker than the human body could do. Telekinesis and things like that also used by movement. Anything like that, teleportation is there as well. Prescience, or as we call it in Realms of the Wild is my Zelda game. Prescience, because that's how it's spelled and it's funny, is the ability to remote view. See the future, things like that. Protection, exactly that. Forming shields, protecting yourself from things. So because of that, you can create a lot of different characters. One of the things I've enjoyed the most about playing Open Legend was, again, I did it for this Zelda game, and the way that we created everyone's characters is I talked with each player individually and said, well, what kind of character do you want to play? And we created 4 and then added a 5th one later on, very, very different characters. The first one is, if you're familiar with the Zelda world in general, first one is a Goron. They are kind of a rock people. They showed up in Ocarina of Time as the first time they show up. And his specialty is he has a bomb for every situation. So he put a lot into his energy attribute, and he also put a decent amount into his might and his fortitude. But because he was kind of an inventor and he made his own bombs, he also put some stuff into logic so that he could create his own bombs, which was very, very interesting. The next one was a Rito. They were a bird people that wanted to kind of be a bard, but a bard with some dangerous things in their backstory. So we created this really cool bard. There's feats are another thing. They again, some feats require certain attributes to be certain levels, and other feats may require some feats to be able to use them. But it does things like, for this particular character, we because they're a Rito, we gave them the ability to fly. Now, they forget that they can fly every single game, to the point where we have a chat command. The character's name is Pierre, so if you go to Zelda Universe TV, twitch.tv/Zelda Universe TV, and you type !Pierre, there will be a little note that pops up that says, you can fly. That is a feat that you can take, and it takes a decent amount of points that you might be able to put in other things. Feats can also do things like make it easier for you to make area attacks, or make it easier for you to attack multiple times in a single turn. It might make you faster. It might make you better at performing certain banes or boons. It might make it so that you automatically succeed on certain boons. There is a ton of different feats to really customize the character. And so this bard has an accordion, but the handles of the accordion kind of come out and give him 2 ulak knives, which is kind of cool. And so that's a cool character. The next character is a Zora. They're effectively fish people. And she wanted to have kind of a more dark backstory and deal with the idea of life and death. And so we gave her a lot of entropy. And so now her claim to fame is she's put everything into her entropy score and taken a bunch of feats that just give her lots of advantage on any time she makes an entropy. And so she just drains the life out of people and is able to heal herself as she sucks the life out of people. We created kind of an energy vampire witch thing. And it's a very cool character. The final one wanted to be a Shika, who are kind of the protectors of the royal family, and they also made a bunch of stuff and people don't like him. It's an interesting character concept, and she wanted to be an inventor. So not only does she have a super high logic score, but we took a feat that allowed her to use her logic score in place of her agility. Basically saying that, well, unlike someone like maybe a ninja who would throw things by just having really good control over their muscles, she's able to fight and attack by basically doing a full-on Sherlock from the Robert Downey Sherlock Holmes movies, where the world kind of slows and she goes, okay, well, if I do this and this and this, and then the angle over there is that, so if I hit it from this here, and that's how she fights. She uses her logic ability to make all of her attacks. She has her own homemade hook shot that she uses for almost anything, and she's constantly scavenging for new parts and creating new items and weapons and different things for the party. It is an incredibly cool character. We basically made this kind of tech artificer style character, and the final one we added a few years later is literally a shadow thief. She can teleport through shadows. She can bend them to her will. She can actually transform into a being of shadows and take over other people's shadows in order to do that. There's a feat that gives you an alternate form that allows you to basically create a secondary character that you can transition between. All of those things are built into this very, very interesting kind of rules light system. And the limitations for all these characters are generally based on lore. Your character is going to have access to a lot of different banes and boons, and it's up to you and the GM to decide, okay, does it make sense for you to have access to this boon? Like, the energy skill can have access to what's called the barrier boon, which literally creates a barrier, and there's a bunch of different things. Like, you can make a damaging barrier, so anytime somebody goes near it, they get hurt. Or an impassable barrier where people can't get through it. Well, does it really make sense for someone that controls shadows to create a barrier that burns people? Not really. So those are the kind of questions and conversations you need to have with your GM as you're kind of building your character. Is the idea of like, well, I want this boon to work this way, and I think my character would do this, and there's enough tools here to create literally any character you want. And it's the thing that I love the most about this, because I have spent hours just building random characters and seeing how weird I can make them, and I've never found a character I can't build in Open Legend in any way, shape, or form. I can make them do anything as long as you give me enough levels. And generally, right at level 1, you can create a character that will do most of what you want. You won't be super good at it. It may be really limited, but you can find ways to do just about anything that you want. So yeah, character creation itself is really fun. They do have a character sheet, but at least the one that I have is not form fillable. However, it doesn't really matter to me that it's not form fillable, because Hero Muster, if you go to openlegend.com/hero must or openlegend.heromuster.com/character, they have a really, really great Open Legend character builder. You fill out what you want, you tell it what level it is, it'll tell you how many points you have, you put the stuff in, you can hit a button to see what feats are available to you, you can hit a button to see what boons and banes are available to you, you fill them in. There's also a perks and flaws system. Perks and flaws are effectively perks will give you generally something that you can use like once per game session to give you a bonus on something. Flaws are effectively things that you can use to earn what are called legend points. Legend points are the other really cool thing that I forgot in the other section. Legend points effectively are a way for the GM to reward good role-playing moments, and just as a way for the GM to award stuff in general. And you can use a legend point to give yourself one level of advantage on whatever role you want. So if you have disadvantage 2 on something, you can go, well, I'm going to burn 2 legend points, and now I don't have disadvantage on it at all. There's some limitations built in. Check out the system to see exactly how they work. But overall, it's super fun. And yeah, again, creating characters in it is a ton of fun. Moving on. The next section, monsters. Obviously, in an RPG, you're going to need something to go up against. And like I said before, there is no monster manual for this. Again, most, if you think about the D&D books, you have your player's handbook, which will just generally introduce you to the game, and a lot of times will give you everything you need to play a little bit. But to play D&D in games like it, you generally need 3 books. Player's handbook for the players, a monster manual, so you can have things for the players to attack, and a GM's guide or DM's guide to give you other tools for the DM to use. And what happens a lot in the DM's guide is they will also give you a bunch of magic items and other things like that for the DM to reward their players with. So right now we're talking about monsters, and again, there isn't a monster manual for this. Even going through Amira's Dawn, which again I have not read through the entire book, but they have a few stat blocks of NPCs in that, but there really isn't a kind of generic list of monsters in it. So some people would be very very upset about that, because that means that you have to do more work. However, there is a really easy way to build monsters literally on the fly, and because of just the genericness of how the system works, you don't need to spend a ton of time building characters or building monsters. They have what's called a simple build. Simple build, you pick the NPC level. They can go from 1 all the way up to 20. Characters can only go to level 10. Don't worry about that. It's just for kind of balancing encounters. And what it'll do, let's say I want to build a level 4 NPC. Well, level 4 NPC needs to have between 16 and 28 hit points. Okay, that's easy enough. I just pick a number in there. Their defenses should be somewhere between 13 and 19, and then their primary attributes should be a 6, and their secondary attributes should be a 4. So you just take the number 6 and go, well, I am going to create, a kobold. I'm going to create a bunch of kobolds, but they're all going to use the same stat block. And these kobolds, they're not super strong or anything, but they're nimble little suckers. They're small. They have little spears that they're really good at poking you with. So I'm going to put the 6 into agility. But because they are draconic, they also tend to be a little bit hardy. So I'm going to take one of the 4s. I'm going to put that in their fortitude. And then they also are very devoted to the dragon that they worship. So I'm going to put another 4 into the will of them, so that they're going to be really good at doing that. And then I can just go and, fill in the rest. I might pick a couple banes that they're good at. Like maybe these spears make you bleed, so I'm going to give you a persistent damage bane that's activated by your agility. But the other thing that they might be really good at is maybe they're just good at tripping people. So I'll give them a bane that allows you to that allows them to knock you on your back. And so again, I can create an NPC. I can create a monster stat block really, really quick and easy. Now, if you want something more complex, you can literally just build a new character. You can follow the guidelines here as far as hit points and defenses and stuff like that, but then just put as many or as few attributes as you want to create the character that you want. Give them feats, give them banes and boons and things like that to make them really, really interesting. They also have suggested feats in chapter 8, running the game. They have a whole build table for how you can do this, and they have some suggested feats to again make it that much easier. So you don't have to flip through the book or anything like that. You can build the entire character right there and not have to worry about anything. And then they do have boss characters as well, which again basically they're designed to effectively be like 4 normal monsters. So like if I wanted to make a boss level 4, it's supposed to have 70 hit points. Its defenses should be somewhere between 15 to 20. Its primary attribute should be 7, and its primary attributes, you can have multiple primaries, and its secondary attributes should be 5. So as you can see, building stuff pretty easy. So as much as, yeah, it is a little bit annoying that the book itself doesn't have like monsters that you can just pick out, making your own monsters is so quick and so easy. Like I said, I made them on the fly while I'm running the game, and it hasn't slowed me down. Now, I am a very improvisational game master, so what I do may not work for everyone. But if you are a more planning focused one, just when you are planning, instead of picking creatures out of a monster manual, just go, okay, what do I want them to fight this time? Well, they're going to be in a swamp. Maybe I'll have some like slime monsters that they did a deal with, and maybe something like an Utyug or a Shambler or something like that. And then you just build them right there. So it's not a difficult thing in the world. Or it's not a difficult thing at all to make your own monsters in that. But I would say that is a detriment to the system. Now, there are a lot of homebrew stuff that exists out there. Finding it is kind of hard because there's not something like the DM's Guild where you can just find it. But there are a lot of people that are homebrewing the things out there that if you type in Open Legend monsters or something into Google, you'll probably get a decent number of hits if you don't want to make your own stuff. But I highly recommend you do it. Moving on. The next section, equipment and items. So what about, different weapons and the things like that? Well, they do have equipments in Open Legend, and in general, your different equipment and things like that are not going to change your damage dice or anything like that. However, there are certain weapons that are going to have... there will be banes for every single kind of weapon that exists. There are going to be banes that they're just better at. Like unarmed strike. If you're a monk character, I don't know why I would bring up monks. Unarmed strikes are designed are really good at inflicting the stun bane or the knockdown bane. And the way that works is when an attacker uses the weapon to inflict one of the listed banes, they may treat the power level as reduced by 1 for the purpose of meeting bane invocation attribute prerequisites, which the attacker still must meet. Basically, if a bane requires you to have a 5, but you're inflicting it with an unarmed strike, like a stun required 5, but you're using an unarmed strike, well, you can treat it as if it only required a 4. You still have to meet, when you roll, you still have to meet the number required to invoke a 5th level bane, which I believe for a 5th level bane, you have to roll a 20 or higher. So you still need to roll a 20 or higher, but you don't need to have a 5 to be able to try to inflict it. You can have just a 4. And rolling a 20 when you have a 4 in something is not an impossible task in any way, shape, or form. So that's generally how weapons work. Is they will have properties like forceful, precise, swift. It basically just means, what attributes are you using to inflict it. And if you're using a swift weapon, if you're wielding this weapon at the beginning of combat, gain advantage 2 on your initiative roll. Swift weapons effectively just mean that your initiative is a little bit higher. But for the most part, that's really all it's going to be. Is your properties are going to define basically what attribute you use to attack with the weapon, and maybe give you another thing like swift or heavy means you just can't use multiple of them, or the things like that. And then they will give you banes that you're just better at inflicting with those particular weapons. The weapons themselves don't actually, I don't want to say matter. You can define your weapons any way you want to. And on their weapon table, they just give examples like scimitars, short swords, machetes, and saw blades all fall into the one-handed melee category. And they're all good at inflicting persistent damage and the disarmed bane. Bowie knife, shiv, and multi-tool all fit into the same category as well, except they also count as swift weapons and are precise, meaning they use your agility instead of your might to attack them. So literally creating any weapon you want, like when we created the hook shot, we just had to pick a couple properties and kind of define what the range was for it, which range is generally 25, 50, 75, 100 feet. That's really all you're doing. Close range is 25, short is 50, medium is 75, long is 125, extreme range is 300. So again, and that's all feet. So very, very easy stuff to figure out. So creating equipment, like I said, they have a huge list of everything from pitchforks to flamethrowers to submachine guns and baseball bats. Like, if you're just looking for generic weapons, they will have an example here for you. But if you need to make up your own weapon for somebody, it's super easy to do. Now, there are also armor, which effectively just increases your defense and might have a speed penalty. So not really, and it's specifically your guard defense. So not really, again, a super complicated thing to deal with. Some of them require a higher fortitude score to wear. So armor, again, really simple, really easy. And again, they do things like one of the types of medium armor might be armored trench coat or electropolymer armor, or you might have chainmail or a Kevlar vest, or plate mail might be a heavy armor, or power armor, or elven plate mail. Like, they give all these different examples. You don't have to get super anal about the idea, well, this is a plate armor and that means it affects this way. No, really, it's a number on your character sheet. Let the players create whatever they want. Let the players have a character that looks and sounds super cool, and don't let the mechanics get in the way of that. Too often, even in D&D 5th edition, which I think is a very adaptable system, too often the rules get in the way of you playing an interesting or fun kick a character. And Open Legend just doesn't. And I love that about it. They also have, I think they're called, I think they call them extraordinary items. Those are effectively your magic items. And they have some examples like Black Lotus Extract or Digital Camouflage. And effectively, what it does is it gives you access to a certain bane or boon. Or it may give you access to a feat or something like that. So everything is based around banes, boons, and feats. And every so often you might find an extraordinary item that, even though you don't qualify for this feat, or you didn't use your feat points to get it, or you don't have the right attribute to invoke this particular bane or boon, the item does it for you. The hook shot that we created for the Sheikah character. The character's name is Kess, or Kestrel actually, but we call her Kess. That is an extraordinary item that effectively gives her the ability to quote-unquote teleport. But instead of teleport, she shoots her hook shot out and it catches onto something and she flies over to it. And the limitations we put on that is there are certain surfaces that her hook shot can't attach to, and her hook shot has a limited length of chain. So again, creating your own extraordinary or magic items is as simple as, okay, well, let's look at some of the boons. What do the boons do? Or what is the magic item supposed to do? Let's see if there's a boon that allows us to do that. And then we just go, okay, this item gives you access to that boon. And it might be limited, where like Adrenal Biomod, you can just heal yourself with that. Or like a potion might just give you access to a 3rd level heal boon. And once you use it, it's gone. Or you might have a magic shield that you can just manifest when you want it. And so it gives you access to something that normally would require the defense extraordinary ability, but you don't need it anymore. So it gives you some sort of protection or things like that. It's a remarkably easy system to use and modify and just turn into whatever you want. And like I said, I've made some really interesting things. The Shadow Thief character, the character's name is Arel. we gave her these things that we call her stabby bits. Her stabby bits are infused with her shadow abilities, so she can throw a stabby bit, and then her shadow step power is limited to 25 feet. But she can use any of her shadow abilities as if they're originating from one of her from one of her stabby bits. So if she throws a stabby bit on a wall, 50 feet away, she can teleport 25 feet away from that wall or from that stabby bit, as long as there's a shadow near her and there's a shadow over there. So again, you can create these really, really interesting things, and the limitations are going to be lore based. What makes sense for this thing to do? What do you want it to do? You can make it do anything you want. You just have to figure out how powerful you want it to be. Again, it does require a little trial and error. Understand if your GM is new to the system, especially if your GM is new to running games in general. You're going to have a lot of conversations, and every so often they're going to give you something that's just too powerful, and they're going to have to rein it in again a little bit. But just as often, they're going to give you something that's just not powerful enough, and they're going to have to increase its power. Understand that it's going to be a learning experience. Since that's such a great transition, let's move on to GMing the game. As a forever GM, again, I have been running an open legend game for like I said, almost 6 years at this point, and I absolutely love it. Compared to a lot of other systems that I've run, it is probably one of the easiest systems for me personally. Again, I'm an improvisational person, and it's actually something I discussed with some of my players this past Wednesday. They asked a question about a trap that they had discovered, and I hadn't really designed the trap in its entirety. I knew what would happen if they succeeded and what would happen if they failed, and I had a difficulty check for it. And this is in D&D. However, I know the person that created the trap. That character I've completely created. I'm a very character-based person. And so when they asked a specific question, the trap itself had a counterweight on it. And they asked me to describe the counterweight. I'm like, well, it's a machine counterweight. They didn't use just random rocks. This is a very precision-made trap. Its design requires very, very specific weight to be used. Because of that, there is a very specific created weight attached to it. One of the things they asked was there a maker's mark on it? And because of the character that I created is incredibly arrogant and loves to just kind of revel in his superiority, his supposed superiority. He loves to kind of just brag about how smart he is and how much he outsmarts everyone. It would not make sense for him to not have a maker's mark on it. Despite the fact that all it is a weight, he 100% would put his name plastered all over it just to show how amazing he is. And so, yeah, I said, yes, it 100% has a maker's mark on it. I didn't plan that before. They asked a question, and I thought about the character themselves and went, yeah, of course they would have a maker's mark on it. They would have to. They couldn't stop themselves from bragging about how amazingly precise this trap was, so of course they'd put a signature on it. They consider it a form of art. And so because of that, Open Legends works really well for me when I'm GMing, because I can sit there and just kind of create the story itself, and the mechanics will just fit. And sometimes I don't create mechanics for encounters and things like that until we're running them, because I don't know what the players are going to do. And luckily enough for me, I have 5 amazingly clever players. And I've gotten to the point where I don't create solutions to a lot of the problems that I create for them. I create the problems. I might create a trap or a puzzle or something like that, and I don't really need to worry about them having a solution. My players will find one. And about half the time, they will find a solution I didn't come up with. So I just stop coming up with them. It is a huge blessing to have players that are that good, that are that creative, that I can just create unwinnable situations and they just beat them. It's super fun. You may not have players like that, and that's not a bad thing. but Open Legend does allow you to plan as much or as little as you want. If you want to go into mega planning mode and build maps and design every single one of your things and have a difficulty score for every single aspect, you 100% can do that, and the system works really well that way. If you want to do it in the moment, you 100% can do that, and the system works really well that way. It is probably one of the most GM-friendly systems I have personally run, as long as you are willing to understand that the limitations you have to put on how attributes work and things like that. One person's agility score is going to work very different than another person's agility score. We have two different characters in Realms that both use entropy for their abilities. Zulta, the fish witch, the fish vampire witch, she uses entropy to drain the life out of people. Arel, the shadow thief, uses entropy to control shadows. They're both using the same score, but they can't do the same things. Even if they had access to the same banes, like technically, Arel's entropy score is high enough that she could use the life drain bane, or it's actually a boon. She could activate the life drain boon, and mechanically, she's allowed to steal life as part of her attacks. However, that's not how her character's built. And it wouldn't make sense for her to be able to drain the life out of people when her entropy is based on controlling shadows. We give her other abilities that she can do with her shadows, including, like I said, she has an alternate form that allows her to literally take the place of someone else's shadow and completely manipulate another character. Which is really, really interesting. And it also means if a character doesn't have a shadow, she can't use those abilities. So, very interesting, unique things that aren't built into the system itself. They're built into the lore that I created. So as a GM running Open Legend, you really need to spend the time to figure out how your world works. It's something that I recommend for any GM, is spend a little bit of time when you're building a world and figure out, how do things work here? If you're adding a new ability, come up with kind of a reason why it works, not just it does work. If you're going to use magic, well, how does magic work? Is magic kind of like the DnD thing where you have this invisible thing called the weave, and using magic is basically kind of tapping into this energy source called the weave and making it do things for you. And different types of magic interact with the weave in different ways. Wizards literally learn programming code. They know how, they've studied the weave. They know how every single bit works. And so they just type out the program by using the right magic words and using the right spell components. And they know that if I do this, this, and this, the programming language is going to let me do this. Whereas sorcerers, they have an intrinsic connection. They can feel the weave. And so because of that, they just feel it and they go, I want fire to come out. And they know that if they enforce their will on the weave in a certain way, they know that it's going to make fire. Whereas something like a cleric, they pray to their deity. And their deity is the one that actually touches the weave and does things for them. And it's really just their faith in their deity that allows their magic to work. They're not thinking about, what programming language. They're going, I believe that my God is going to smite you. And because of that strong belief, the magic works. So come up with, it doesn't have to be massively complex like that, but come up with some idea like, okay, well, the way magic works in mine is it's basically psychic abilities. You can psychically cause things to work. Okay, well, that means that things that might make it difficult to concentrate are going to stop you from being able to use your magic. Stuff like that. That is going to be the most important thing when you're playing Open Legends, is having just a very basic understanding of the why behind the what of your world. And as long as you have that, or as long as you're willing to create it on the fly, go, okay, I guess we've never dealt with this topic. Yeah, we'll say that it works this way and then make a note about it so that you don't contradict yourself later. That's where Open Legend excels. You can have a magic system any way you want. I created an alchemist, as in Full Metal Alchemist style, you know, using transmutation and equivalent exchange and stuff like that. It makes Open Legend really, really easy to adapt a world that already exists. Like if you want to have your own Holy Grail War from the Fate Stay series, you can do that. And the rules in Open Legend actually have a lot of ways to do it. You can have a base, effectively minions or guardians or things like that. There are summon spells, and then there's also a feat you can take that just gives you a guardian. So you could create your summoned hero as a guardian, effectively, of you, and your character would have their own stat sheet. Your guardian would have its own stat sheet, and you'd be able to use them simultaneously. And since the rules of how the world works already exist, all you got to do is put in your various mages and start your Holy Grail War. Again, tons and tons and tons of opportunity here for GMs to make really interesting, fascinating games. Adapt any system you want, create or adapt any world or or fandom or whatever you want. You can adapt it and create something very, very cool. But the most important thing you're going to need as a GM is whatever world or setting that you've decided to use, you need to make sure you understand the why of how things work. Spend a little bit of extra time to go, okay, if magic's going to exist, these are my rules of magic. Because the more you have those whys, the easier it is to just kind of go with the flow and let your players be as creative as they want. Moving on. Final section, additional resources. This is something that I really haven't been doing in my other Discovering New Dragons, and I think is really essential. I will always have, there will always be a link down below to actually get the system itself. This specific link will be to openlegendrpg.com. That is where the entirety of the system is on there, 100% free. You do not have to spend a penny to play this system. I will also have a link to the Hero Muster character creator. That as well is 100% free, and you can actually log into Hero Muster so that you can save multiple characters, very similar to kind of like D&D Beyond or things like that, where you could have multiple characters there. And again, because this is all open source, because it's all 100% free, Hero Muster has everything that the website has. So all the feats are there, all the perks and flaws are there, all the banes are there. It has everything that you need to create all of your characters. As far as other things that are useful for this system, obviously, if you want to pick up the core book itself, there is a physical version of it, and there is a PDF version. I will say I have the PDF. It is a great PDF. It looks gorgeous, and it reads really, really well. However, for the most part, what is on the website is almost identical, if not absolutely identical, to what you're going to get in the PDF. The PDF is just prettier. And the bookmarks that are built into the PDF are not massively robust. So while picking up the PDF is a great way to support Open Legend and hopefully get more official stuff, it is 100% optional. There are some cool stuff in here, like they have example characters like a battle mage. The artwork for it is fucking badass. They also have a Beastmaster with a Manticore companion, a Chrono Mage, a Druid, a Gunslinger. These are all, and I believe they have these same examples on the website, but they just look prettier and just look really, really cool. And they explain how every single feat and other things allow the character to work the way It's expected. So these are wonderful if you're having a hard time trying to figure out how to build a character or what kind of interesting things you can do. This whole chapter is absolutely amazing to give you ideas of just really, really interesting characters. One of my favorite ones. I'm going to mispronounce this because it's Japanese and I don't speak Japanese at all. But I think it's Ningyaozukai. Ningyaozukai. Which apparently roughly translates as puppeteer. It is a character who the entire way they fight, like they themselves don't have any strength or anything, but they have a connection with a magical suit of armor that they can control remotely. So they use the alternate form feat to basically, whenever they invoke their magical suit of armor, which is completely separate from them, they use alternate form and effectively change into a different character. So their primary character can have mostly like social abilities, but their alternate form can have strength and have other things that it does. And it's really, really cool. Yeah. Other resources, like I said, there is a campaign setting called Amories. I'm never going to pronounce it right. AMAUREA Dawn. That is their kind of quote unquote default campaign setting. The book itself is nothing but lore, which is fine. And I guess maybe they do have. I'm going to go to page 119 real quick. So they do kind of have a kind of pseudo. There it is. They do have kind of a monster manual in Amoria's Dawn or Amoria's Dawn, where chapter 7 is called Adversaries and Allies, and it's got a bunch of different. It's got a bunch of different stat blocks. It looks like a monster manual. So if you are not really all that comfortable building your own monsters, picking up Amoria's Dawn, never going to pronounce that right. We're just going to call it the Dawn. Picking up this this campaign setting is going to give you some stuff that'll make it a little bit easier. I think almost every single monster that they have in here, they don't really have generic wolves or anything like that. They have things like a Dusktide Drape or a House Lehasar Blade or a Clawbeak, things like that. So you're not going to get your kind of generic animals or anything like that, but it will give you good ideas about what to do. Beyond that, I don't have a lot of other resources because there isn't something like there is apparently a really, really robust homebrew community, but because I've been so detached from it, like I didn't know about the problems with the Kickstarter until like a year or two ago because I didn't back the Kickstarter, so I never had to deal with it. I just saw all the cool stuff once it all came out. So I'm kind of removed from the community itself, but I know I believe there's a Discord server that you can find. Again, if you just type Open Legend into Google, you will find tons and tons and tons of resources. And be able to talk with other people. I would assume there's probably a subreddit for it as well. But yeah. So, because I just like this. Final thoughts. Overall, Open Legend is probably one of my favorite systems I have ever played. And every new system I find, with or without meaning to, I will almost always compare it to Open Legend. Just because of how Open Legend is. I can create anything I want. I've come up with multiple campaign ideas specifically designed to work in Open Legend. And like I said, I've been running an Open Legend game for almost 6 years. Hopefully this weekend, we're going to have one of our final episodes for it. We'll find out if that works or not because availability is a pain in the butt. But it is... it is pretty amazing and wonderful, and I hope that this video has made you guys as excited about it as I am. Otherwise, that is going to be all for me today. As always, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super, super important in the comments down below. Hearing about the system itself, what are you most excited about? Do you like the dice exploding? Do you like the classless system or the skill-based system? Do you like the every roll matters idea of the system? Or do you just have a character that you really want to play? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is all for me today, and I will see you guys on Wednesday. I'm going to try that one more time. We're going to see you guys on Wednesday today for us to do our first Designing New Dragons, where we build a super awesome open legend character. Check it out. That's all for me. I will see you guys next time. All right. Bye-bye.